There we go. Management will be so happy. They can see the word Becker. Got to keep management happy.
Absolutely.
I can move this and adjust a little bit. Get rid of that. Maybe not as good. All right, readjust. Yep, very good. We have so many contraptions here. It's always tough to figure out which one works the best with where they set up the curtain the last time we were here. All right, so I'm going to move this. Here. That seems to be the best version. But we want to get the full name Becker. Can't miss the full name Becker.
Well, more importantly, that we want the full Tim. That's perfect.
Well, thank you.
That looks pretty good.
It looks good enough, right? They'll figure out who we are.
Indeedy.
Tim, you're good to go.
I'm good to go. All right. Put that right up there. Well, good morning, CPA exam candidates. Welcome, no matter where you are in the world. I'd like to greet you. My name is Tim Gearty. I'm going to be your host for the next 45 minutes to an hour as we go through your plan to be successful on the CPA exam. We've got lots of great material to share with you. We're going to give you some inspiration here so that you're ready to pass the next CPA exam. Oh, by the way, look at all that stuff. Boy, they build me up. Hopefully I'll meet your expectations in this program. So let's talk a little bit about the leader in CPA review prep, 60 years. In fact, this is even older than my counterpart, Peter Olinto, or I know him as Sugar Bear. By the way, some people say, why do you call him Sugar Bear Olinto? The reason is when he was in college, he worked his way through school by being a DJ at various clubs, and his handle was Sugar Bear. So I've always known him as Sugar Bear Olinto. You know him as well as Mr. Peter Olinto, one of the best counting professors you'll ever meet. Well, in the years that they've been offering this course, and by the way, I took Becker way back in the late 70s when I sat for the exam. Ultimately, we have over 1 million candidates have prepared with us. When you look at the top 100 scores on an annual basis, we get 95, 97% of them. And in addition, literally look at this, 2,900 accounting firms, corporations, government agencies, and universities have chosen us as the course that they want their people to take to pass the CPA exam. So, oh, look at this. Everybody's happy. By the way, they're not practicing social distancing. Shame on them, right? Again, in this environment, we're supposed to be a little bit more careful, but that doesn't mean we're going to be socially distant from our studying and our preparation for this exam. So let's talk a little bit about it. What we're going to study here is today's preparation will determine tomorrow's achievement. And if you'll notice, first of all, make sure you've made your reservations. Now, if the distance from your home to where you're going to take the exam is exceptionally long, then I suggest that you get lodging near the exam. The last thing in the world you want to have is a situation where you get stuck in traffic, you get lost on the highway, and you don't know where to go or you don't know where to park, and now all of a sudden you're late for your exam. Even if you get there just a minute or two early, you'll be so full of anxiety that anxiety will ultimately not allow you to do your best performance. All right, stick to your normal eating, sleeping, and exercise habits. Don't all of a sudden, those last weeks, start cramming, staying up extra late, eating all sorts of different stuff to keep your energy up. Try to stick with a normal diet, your normal sleep patterns. By the way, if you're one of those who likes to sleep late, like one of my daughters, I think she's nocturnal. She loves to sleep till 11 o'clock in the morning, and then she's good to go until, 1 o'clock in the evening. So she likes that one. Well, make sure then that your exam time is when you can perform best. Visit the Prometric site so that you're familiar with where it is. I remember when I was sitting for the exam. Now, it was paper and pencil back then. And, of course, it was also, at an exam site. Everybody showed up the same day in May or the same day in November. But I drove a couple days before. I drove up to the site, figured out where a good parking spot was, actually kind of walked around the building just to see what it was like, get a feel for it, so that the day of there was no surprises, no anxiety. I already anticipated what was going to happen. Obviously, arrive early. You can sit in your car, you can look at your notes one last time, review that item that you figure might be on the exam or that we've told you is important to know because it could be a heavy hitter. But sit there, be relaxed. You can look around, watch traffic going by. You may see some other people who are also going to be taking the exam at that same time. They'll be sitting in their car. So you can relax, have that cup of coffee, that soda, whatever it is that you like to have just beforehand. Now, avoid distractions. Again, you're going to have a lot of people who are wishing you well. I remember the one for myself, and I'll share it with you. The day of the exam, I remember getting up, and I took my shower, and all right, I've got my stuff, and I went out to my car. My parents had decided to surprise me, and they had balloons all over the car, tied to the windshield wipers, the doors, with good luck, good luck, good luck. I mean, lovely parents, love them to death. But obviously, one of those, I didn't need it at that time. So be aware, try to avoid the distractions of friends, phone calls, going through your social media and having people wish you well. They're going to do it. They're behind you, but try to avoid a lot of those distractions. And don't attempt to cram the night before. Studies have shown that cramming the night before is not the best way. If you're going to be cramming, cram in advance. Cram over the next couple of days and then slow it down, go back to your normal studies right before the exam. And finally, don't discuss exams with other candidates. Remember, it is a confidential exam. Can you say, boy, it was hard, or that was easier than I thought? And by the way, that is something that also can be distracting. I remember when I sat for the exam, it was not a non-disclosed exam. You went in the morning, you took one part, everybody came out at lunchtime, hung around in the parking lot, then you went back in for the afternoon section. I can remember running into some friends, and one or two of them were like, oh, this was so easy, it wasn't bad at all. I'm disappointed that I put in so much work for an exam that was so easy. I was like, my God, I didn't think it was that. I thought it was really, really hard. I kept my mouth shut and I nodded. Ironically, I passed the whole exam that first sitting. None of them did. They were completely off. So don't let other people distract you with what they're talking about the exam. Well, next item is choice, not chance, will determine your destiny. And in this case, you should be looking at a comprehensive review of materials. One of the mistakes that some people make is they say, oh, I had great professors. And my professors, they used one of the best accounting books in the world. I'll just study the accounting book and I'll be ready. Problem is, there are things in your accounting program that won't be tested on the CPA exam. And there are things that maybe they went over very lightly or didn't cover at all that will be tested on the CPA exam. With our course, we sit there and we know what's on the exam, and we build the course around what you need to know. Not anymore. In fact, if you're really good in any one section, let's say tax, you may hear me say, this is an item that's deductible. And you're really smart. You know tax. You've been doing it for years. You may say, oh, but Tim, there's an exception to that rule, blah, 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 and you're not mentioning it. You know why I'm not mentioning it? They don't test at that deep level. I only tell you what you need to know for the exam. I'm not preparing you for life. I'm not preparing you to do somebody's tax return. I'm preparing you for what they want you to know on the CPA exam. Next, a method of pre-review and ongoing self-evaluation. Most of you have probably seen with our course that you'll take a chapter and then you'll do multiple choice. You'll do some of the exercises, maybe even our skills practice. And we also recommend at various points that you try a pre-test exam. Part of the benefit of a pre-test exam is also getting your timing down. Remember, there is a certain amount of a time element to the exam, and all of us should know that. You may be able to work on a multiple choice question and think about it, and then scratch down some numbers and then think about it some more and get the right answer. But if it took you 12 minutes to get that one multiple choice question correct, you're probably putting yourself at a disadvantage at other areas. So there is a timing element, and the practice exams help you build your confidence at measuring your time. The next, the study plan, which enables you to review each area methodically and thoroughly. One of the things I always like to say is if you actually deep dive into the AICPA's recommendations, they will tell you that they recommend that you put in between 300 and 500 hours in order to successfully pass the whole exam. So let's break that out. It's 75 to about 120 hours for each part. Here's how I like to think of it and how I did think of it. I tell you that for every 1 hour you study, you've earned 1 point towards passing the exam. So if you put in 75 hours, in theory, you should get a 75. If you put in 90 hours, you should be up at around a 90. Now, I never recommend that somebody only do 75 hours because anything bad could happen. I always suggest that you try for that upper limit, that 90 to 100 area, so that therefore, if there was a question that was bad, you weren't on the top of your game that day, you will still successfully pass the exam. So every day, if over a weekend you put 4 hours of studying in, congratulate yourself. You're 4 points closer to passing the next exam. Notice the solutions approach. This is how you earn points on the exam. You want to read the question carefully. You've heard me in the course say, what is the call of the question? Some questions will say, which of the following is allowed? Other will say, which one of the following is not allowed? So obviously, if you didn't read that question carefully, there are 3 allowable answers, only 1 disallowed. They want you to choose the disallowed. You read the question, you didn't carefully read it, you saw something that's allowable and you said, aha, that's it. But you answered the wrong question. So you want to make sure that you're answering what they're asking, the call of the question. Take that extra moment to carefully read the question to make sure what you're going to be answering is what they're asking you to. Then understanding of the grading process. Now, no examiner will ever say there's a curve. They'll never say that. But there is a curve. The curve is built on the idea that ultimately, if you get X amount of the questions right, it's up to this level that you're going to be graded. Notice also, same thing with some of the other parts, such as ultimately when you're doing the task-based simulations. They will review it carefully. They will see where you made your points and where obviously you went astray. And then they'll work from there. So therefore, understanding the grading system, always put something down on the paper. It's not an exam where a wrong answer is a minus. It's only correct answers are a plus. And of course, try a couple of simple essays. Make sure that you're good in those. Now, I always admire people who can speak 2 languages. I can't. And therefore, I'm impressed when somebody can speak 2 languages. And if English is your second language, and you have to do the essays, the skills writing portion, very, very simple rules that we give to you in the course. Short sentences, simple words. Keep your paragraphs to 3 or 4 sentences maximum. If you're not sure how to spell a word, pick a different word. You don't have to say that ultimately, I will argue. If you don't know how to spell argue, say, I will explain, or I will give the following information. Keep it simple. Don't write long sentences. Long sentences usually have problems, run-on sentences, dangling participles, etc. So easier with the short ones. Look at that sentence. Try a couple of simple essays. You get the point, and look how short it was. And of course, review. Don't do it, just review an essay for any remaining areas as you're getting closer to the exam. You don't have to redo it. I was sitting there and I remember looking at a full-blown problem, closing my eyes and saying, all right, the first step is to do such and such, come up with an answer, then the second step. I would think through how I would approach the problem. So if you're getting down to a time crunch, that may be a good approach. The next one, there's a famous baseball player from a very famous baseball team in America, the New York Yankees. And way back in the 60s and 70s, a very famous catcher for the New York Yankees was a guy by the name of Yogi Berra. He always had very funny statements. And one of his very funny statements, which I've always used, is if you don't know where you're going, you're liable to end up someplace else. Right? You got to know what you're preparing for. And that's an important element of this whole program. So make sure you have your proper ID. Ultimately, that's your permit to get into the exam. You must have all your paperwork. So literally, the night before, make sure it's all together in a folder. You have it ready to go, and then you're off. If you're going to be staying at a hotel because you have a far distance to go to that exam site, make sure before you leave to go to the hotel, you have everything there, it's in a folder, and you bring it with you. Double check it when you get to the hotel, and make sure you bring it into the car with you as you're heading to the facility. Ultimately, bring pencils. You may want to work things out, erasers in your car. You may want to have a small pencil sharpener so that you can ultimately prepare. Energy foods, especially in light of the fact that maybe when you get there and you're waiting, you may have, raisins, candy, you may have a snack bar. Obviously, if you're hungry, you want to be able to quench that necessity right away. Juice and water are obviously another important element. And of course, make sure you bring a reliable watch. Now, every site is a little different. What you can bring in is usually virtually nothing. Watches, if it's a normal watch, sometimes they'll allow it. Your Apple smartwatches and things like that, where you could actually look for an answer and you could type something in, they may prohibit that. So be aware, find out what your site will and will not allow you to bring in. And of course, one of the things you should consider is a jacket or a sweatshirt. You never know about the site. Sometimes you get to a site and it's extremely hot in there. The proctors like warm and they just turn it up. And all of a sudden you're baking, so you want to be able to take off that sweatshirt, have a nice light shirt on. Conversely, maybe the heat ain't working so well there and it's going to be incredibly chilly. Or your seat is right next to a vent and the air conditioning is blowing on you. So you want to make sure you have a sweater or something else that you can modify your temperature with so you're comfortable during the course of the exam. And of course, maybe tissues, things of that sort. In your car, you might want to be leaving aspirin and things of the sort so that if you have a headache afterwards or even before, you can take the necessary items. And finally, no binoculars. Be aware. By the way, for those of us who wear glasses, make sure you bring your glasses with you. You don't want to get there and then say, oh, I forgot my glasses, and now you're trying to read the screen. It could be much more challenging. By the way, take a look at this picture. There is no right way to do something wrong. There's 1,000 wrong ways to do things. There's only a few ways to do it right. Now, a couple of things you want to know is lack of knowledge of material testing. In our review course, we're giving it to you, whether you're taking our financial, our regulation, our audit, or our BEC. We'll tell you what's going to be on there. We'll tell you the heavy hit areas. We'll go through them very, very carefully with you so that you are aware and there should be no surprises. Now, every so often, we'll get a candidate who tells us, Tim, there was something on my exam that you guys said was not going to be there. And I believe them. Now, they don't tell us what it was, but I can pretty much guess. And I'll say, if there is something that is completely out of left field, it's probably a pre-test question. Remember, they may be ultimately doing some pre-test for the exam that will be offered next summer. They want to make sure the questions are fair. So they test it to see how you did on it. And then that doesn't count towards your score. So there is always a possibility of a pre-test question. Don't get yourself all worked up and say, oh my gosh, there's going to be stuff on my exam that they didn't prepare me for. Go on the assumption it's a pretest. Try to do your best, just in case, but more likely than not, it's a pretest question. Notice failure to understand the requirements of a question. They may ultimately give you, say, in the area of tax, they'll give you a whole bunch of information, and you think they want you to do the entire 1040, and yet all they want you to do is the sole proprietor's Schedule C for a sole proprietor. And they want to know, do you know what goes on that? So make sure that you're answering the question. They may be giving you a question in financial, and you think, oh, okay, I can do the balance sheet, and yet they want the income statement items, or they want the cash flow items. Usually they're not trying to trick you, they're not trying to trap you, but if you're careless and you're rushing and you're frantic, it could create a mistake. Read the problem. Take the extra second. Don't read the first line and then presume what they want you to do and then jump into the answer. Take the moment, read the question over, mentally think, okay, how am I going to approach this, and then start your answer. Sloppiness, computation errors can be a problem. Typing in wrong answers, typing in something incorrectly. So take the extra moment. Failure to proofread and edit. When you're writing a response, if you had to write something about please prepare the disclosure for this particular incident as a subsequent event, make sure that you typed it in, read it over. I can tell you, and I've been doing this for 40 years, I will ultimately respond to a client, and I'm typing away, and all of a sudden I'll read it, and I'll realize, oh, I didn't even talk about what the question was. I went into an ancillary point. Go back, take a moment. Did I answer the question? So in proofreading, reread the question, then read your answer. Make sure your answer applies what the question requested and required, and then make sure that you've edited it correctly. And then, of course, your timing. You should be able to manage your timing. And one of the best ways to do that is our practice exams. That will help you start to become more proficient at the timing that you're going to go on. And by the way, in the last few minutes, don't panic. There is always going to be nervousness. I can tell you, Peter Olinto, Sugar Bear, and I have talked about when we sat for the exam. And he says, man, I was a nervous wreck. And when I walked out, I thought I failed. And by the way, I did too. I'll give you a little frame of reference. I graduated number one in my college class. I graduated what they call summa cum laude, straight A's. I walked out of every exam in college like I knew I passed. In fact, my question was, did I get a 95 or 100? I was that sure every time. I didn't say it to the other students. I wasn't arrogant like that, but I was very confident when you went out into the hallway. When I came out of the CPA exam, I was dead sure I had failed everything. That exam rattled me, and I had been told it was going to rattle you, and it did. But you know what? When the results came, I passed all 4 parts. You will be successful. Keep on punching. Keep on going after it. Don't ever give up. And by the way, like Paul Masson wine, some of us shall not study for an exam before it's time. We decide, oh, I don't have to do my final review this weekend. I still got 2 other weekends to go. And we procrastinate, procrastinate, and procrastinate. That is the biggest villain. So first, make an inventory of the exam. What part are you studying for? How far in the chapters have you gone? Have you done all the multiple choice questions? Have you marked the ones that gave you the most difficulty? Did you try the task-based simulations? Did you work through them? Did you find areas where you needed to improve? Did you move on to the next chapter? How many more chapters do you have to go? When are you going to be sitting for the exam? Kind of work your way backwards. If you're going to sit for the exam on, say, December 15th, well, that happens to be approximately 20 days from now. How are you going to spend those 20 days? How much more do you have to do to study the first time? How much more then how much time do you want to review everything? And then your final recap. So figure it out. Oh, I want my recap to be the last 2 days. Okay, well, now there's 18 more. Oh, my final review, I want to spend 5 days carefully going over. In the morning, 1 chapter, the afternoon, a different chapter. All right, so now you need another 5 days. And then how much more time to get the rest of the stuff done? First, blush through it. So kind of plan your items out. Order of answering questions, as we said, within each testlet, you can work the questions, you can go back within each testlet. You can't go back to a testlet once you've submitted it. But within those, if you see one that looks really long, really hard, you might decide, let me hold off on that one. Of course, your budgeting. We've mentioned this a couple of times already. You want to make sure that you have your timing down. And ultimately, you'll either see the light or you're going to feel the heat as you get closer to the exam. Read, of course, and follow all the instructions. And that starts with you've registered, when you're to be there, what you're to bring there, what you can't bring into the site. Make sure you have all that done well in advance. Listen to the proctor as you get into the exam and sit down. The proctors there will usually make some comments. They'll say, we're going to begin in just a moment. Everybody's computer. From this point on, if you need to use the facilities, raise your hand, or you may get up and walk, but please, go this way or that way. And of course, social distancing is important. Also, if the state board earlier provides instructions to you, then you should read them over as well. Don't wait for the night before. And always start by scanning through your entire questions in that area. Look to see, this testlet is going to heavily test me on topic A and topic B. I don't have to worry about such and such. Maybe that'll be in the next area. And by the way, it's not a matter of life and death. It's more important than that. Right? This is your CPA exam. So in this case, let's take a look at some of the comments here. Ultimately, you're going to do your multiple choice questions first, then you do the essay questions, and you have to do them in order. The first one first, then the second one, etc. So you do them in that order. As you do your conceptual multiple choice, some you'll know immediately, do them. So within that testlet that has X amount of multiple choice questions, do the ones you know first. They're going to be easy. They'll build your confidence. By the way, it's human nature. When you finish an area, you don't dwell on the items that you knew and thought were easy. What you dwell on is the ones you didn't know. They bother you. They haunt you. It's normal. So be aware that that's going to permeate your thought process and thereby exaggerate, maybe I didn't do so well. You answer a lot of the questions very easily. Mr. Olinto and I often joke that when you're on the exam, you'll hear our voice. On certain questions, you'll say, oh my gosh, Tim did this one right in my class, or Pete did this one right in my class. This is great. I know how to do this one. There are others that you're going to go, oh my gosh, I remember looking at that one. How do you handle that? Take a moment. Think about it. Use logic. Go to your basic fundamentals. Also, some you'll say, I don't know this. And that's going to happen. Nobody is expecting you to get 100 on this test. Remember, you want to get a 75. And by the way, with a 75 doesn't mean you have to answer 3 out of 4 multiple choice questions correctly. With they never call it a curve, you may be able to get out of every 10 questions, 6.5 or 7 correctly, not 7.5, and still ultimately pass. And of course, it's okay to guess. Remember, there's no negative point value. So therefore, if you don't know, take your best guess. Ultimately, if you can narrow it down to 2 choices, that's even better. A lot of times you'll see that you're sure that this is income. You're just not sure if it goes to the income statement or other comprehensive income. And you're just not sure. Well, the other 2 say it ain't income at all, or it goes straight to, the balance sheet. And those 2 are wrong. Well, now you're at a 50-50 chance. So take the moment to see if you can eliminate 1 or 2 of the answers as obvious distractors. And of course, don't leave any blanks. Like I said, you can only earn points. You're never going to lose points for answering incorrectly. And of course, once again, this seems to be one of our common mottos. Make sure that you keep track of your time. All right, note when you started. Obviously, the computer screen will show you the amount of time left. It'll give you alerts as time gets near the end. Don't panic. Just like anyone else, think of a soccer player or any other sports athlete. When you get down near the end, you still want to maintain your composure. You still want to answer as many questions as you can correctly. And remember, pace yourself. Time is not your enemy, as long as you're aware of it and you keep it in mind. Well, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Have confidence. You've graduated from a university. They passed you. All those different professors said you're smart enough to be awarded credit for this class. You've done well. You're ready to pass. By the way, lots and lots of people doubt their ability to pass. They say, oh, my school is overrated. My teachers were easy. You know, I'm not really that good. Yes, you are. You are that good. Most universities, if you graduated from, you've got that degree, you're ultimately somebody who can be a CPA. So, as we said, use your solution approach. On essay questions, partial answers are better than no answer. I always say if you have to type in an explanation, type it in. You know, explain both answers. Hey, this would most likely go to the income statement because of such and such. There is another school of thought that says it could go to the balance, right? Throw it all in there, the kitchen sink if you have to. Write essays for maximum points. Show what you know. Show that you've learned. Put down everything you can think of that relates to that topic. And of course, plan, analyze the requirements, and maybe take a moment to close your eyes and visualize what the solution should look like. Read the narrative, right? Read the question. What did they tell you in the facts? And then from the facts, then look for the requirement and answer it correctly. Develop a keyword outline. Think to yourself, how do I want to approach this? I want to talk about the balance sheet, then the income statement, then cash flows, then footnotes, or whatever. This is an important element, is to visualize how you're going to answer the various items. Notice, earn additional points. Work smarter is better than harder. Figure out what you have to do. Now, a couple of extra items. I want to talk a little bit about the exam itself, just for a moment. A lot of times people will sit for the exam and understand less than 10% will pass each part their first sitting. That means 90+% are going to fail at least one part on their journey. But as you've probably heard Confucius's famous statement, which my father always repeated to me, man is not judged by how often he falls. Man is judged by how many times he rises. And that's true. The AICPA has a statistic that I think is very interesting. They say an individual who prepared and sat for the exam and failed, they got a 60, a 62, a 65. So it wasn't even really close. Well, that person, if they make an earnest effort to restudy, and by the way, you don't have to study another 75 hours. It may be 25, because that will be the tie-in of all the information, refreshing your mind. That person has almost an 85 to 90% chance of passing it the second time. Yeah, the second time. If you go to the companies that you work for, and you go down the hall and you see all those CPAs with their certificates in their office, if you were to ask 90% of them, did you pass everything in one sitting? Most will say, no, I had to sit for such and such a second time. I came close, but I had to sit for such and such. I meet with partners in the large accounting firms, and they'll say, hey, Tim, you know, I took your course, but I failed a part, or I failed two parts, actually, and I had to sit for two of them over again. Two I passed first time, two of them I had to sit for a second time. Having that courage will eventually get you the exam. Remember, they don't have on your exam certificate, summa cum laude, graduated with honors. You're just a CPA. It is ultimately very, very impressive. And by the way, once you pass the exam and you become a CPA, years later, people then say the CPA doesn't stand for Certified Public Accountant. CPA stands for can't pass again, because they worked really hard, they did it well, and then they moved on with their career. Having that license for the rest of your career is awesome. By the way, there are statistics that show that if you ultimately graduate from college, you make one level of money. You more than double your income over your lifetime if you have the CPA. And that doesn't mean you stay in accounting. In fact, for a number of years at Becker, the woman who was head of our marketing and sales, the worldwide head, was the CPA. She had graduated from college, eventually passed the exam. She failed a couple of times, but eventually passed all the parts. She worked in public for a year or two, decided she hated it. She said, this is not me. I can't stand this. And she went into sales and marketing. But because she had that credential, ultimately she had a leg up on everyone else. She could read the financial statements. She could understand what they meant. She understood variances, budget to actual. And that allowed her to go up the food chain. And eventually we ran into her. We brought her aboard in ours, and she's doing incredibly well. So there's a lot of advantages to having that CPA. It's going to be worth it. One time once, you make the commitment, and you have that certificate for the rest of your life. How good is that? So rely on your basic accounting concepts. Write, answer, and you will be successful. Well, at this point, I want to open up the lines to any questions, any comments, or if you just need a break. So let me open it up and see if there are any questions that I can possibly answer. All you have to do is unmute yourself, and then you can ask any questions. Or if you want to your instructor, you can email them, and then they'll read them off to me.
Tim, I'll just say the questions which students are asking. One of them is preferable sequence for CPA exam.
Okay, great question, and thank you for asking that. Ultimately, the way that we usually recommend it is take the financial accounting first, then take the tax, then take the auditing, and then do the BEC. And I'll explain why. I'm going to do this by starting with the auditing. Auditing may ask a question that really isn't testing a lot of heavy-duty accounting, but they'll say this: you are the auditor, and you have been asked to audit the derivative and hedge activity of the company. Please discuss the risk factors that you are concerned with. Whoa, what a question. Derivative and hedge accounting, that's so hard. And I'm doing auditing. I don't remember what those rules are. But if you had taken the financial first, you were taught those rules in their basic format so that you can answer the questions. And I'll give you a quick lesson there. Hedging and derivatives are financial instruments. You've gone to a bank and said, hey, will you take over this instrument, and if it goes up, you make the extra money, but if it goes down, you've got to make up the deficit to me. And the bank says, yeah, we'll bet that this is going to go up, but we'll take the downside. So it's a financial instrument, which means it's marked to market. Every period, your company will write it up if it's protecting you. You'll write it down and show it as a liability if ultimately you have to give away something. So you have this receivable that's going up in value. Well, you're going to give that away to the bank. So the derivative is a liability and goes down in value. Conversely, if your receivable is going down in value, well, then the bank's going to have to make up that difference, and it's an asset. That derivative is an asset to you. So ultimately, you're writing it up if it's protecting you, writing it down if it's taking something away from you. That's called mark-to-market accounting. That mark-to-market accounting in this particular circumstance runs through the income statement. Okay, that's derivative and hedging in a nutshell. So you're the auditor. What are you concerned with? I'm concerned with determining how management first of all, do they have a derivative? Is it a bona fide contract? I'm concerned with, ultimately, how did they fair value it? Did they fair value it based on level 1, an identical item in the market, level 2, a similar item in the market, or unobservable inputs? In other words, a discounted cash flow Excel spreadsheet. I'm concerned about that. And then I'm concerned, did they properly record it in the income statement, right? And then is it properly presented in the balance sheet? That's all I'm interested in. Now you know how to answer that audit question. As an auditor, I would be concerned with the contractual, the legal contractual obligation, and I would want to verify that. I would then look to determine how they determine the fair value each period, and whether that was done based on identical, similar, or unobservable inputs, and that the ultimate adjustment, did it properly run through the income statement, and is the item properly reported at its fair value on the balance sheet. All right, simple answer right there, but you get the idea. A really hard question. And because you took financial first, you're more likely to know the accounting that you have to have a fundamental understanding of to answer it. Now, why financial and then tax? Because if you know the accounting rules, there are so many areas in tax where you start with financial income, and then there's a couple of tweaks. So understanding the financial rules is literally halfway, if not greater, into understanding the tax rules. So financial first, that'll help you do the tax, then financial and tax will help you do the audit. BEC is kind of its own beast. That's why I put that at the end. And usually, by the way, BEC has a very high pass rate. Reason why? Because by the time you get to BEC, you've already passed 3 parts of the exam. Your confidence is sky high. You're feeling good about it. You're one step away. It's kind of like running a race, and you're almost at the finish line, and you can start sprinting now. You feel really good. I'm going to make it. And that's why financial first, tax, then audit, then BEC. That's the general rule. Now, of course, any one person may have incredible experience in one part and choose to do that one part first so that they get it out of the way. I certainly agree with that. But for the general student, financial, then tax, or regulation, then audit, and then BEC. But thank you for that question. I hope I answered it. What other questions do we have?
Another question which has been asked is that should we go for all 4 papers together, like a back-to-back exam? Should we give all 4 papers back-to-back?
Okay, great question. You know, that question depends on your job, your family life, your ultimate time commitment. Let me give you an example. I graduated. The firm that's hiring me has said because of COVID-19, they're not going to bring me aboard until the COVID-19 is cured. So they're talking hypothetically, May of next year. And they said, you've got a job, but right now we don't need you. So now you've got 4 or 5 months. Yeah, then definitely study and go back to back to back, prepare for all of them. But if you're working, you've got family commitments, going for one part first, taking a break of a week or 2, rebonding with family members, catching up with work that may have fallen a little bit behind, then preparing for the second part, taking another break after you've done that one, taking a week or 2 off, then going for the third part, maybe will reduce the stress level. It all depends on, one, how comfortable you are with all the material. Some people can manage all 4 parts, studying for it all together. And if that's the case, and you've got a deadline because you've got to start work very, very shortly, might be the best answer at all. But for those of us who have extra time that you can ultimately put in and spread it out, that may be a better approach, in particular if you have family obligations. All right, any other questions?
Thank you, Tim. Another question that is asked is that, is it possible to clear BEC in the last week of December if we start studying now? Okay, good question. And the answer is, of course, yes. You can definitely do that. Remember, you still have a month to go. And obviously, depending on, if you're working 60 hours a week at the job and you have family obligations when you get home, you have a family with children, it may be a little bit tough to get all the studying in. But remember, you need to get approximately 75 minimum hours of prep 90 to 100 is more desirable for any one part. If you take, let's just take a middle number there, 80. Well, you've got over 5 weeks to go before that exam. Ultimately, that means you've got to put in someplace around 15 to 20 hours a week. If you have the weekends to study, and you can also commit 1 or 2 evenings or afternoons, it's absolutely, positively, you can do it. Remember, you have the ability to focus your energy and ultimately be able to get this done. So yes, you can do it.
Thank you, Tim. We'll take 2-3 more questions. One of them is how
Sure, any amount.
Okay, one of them is how to best prepare for governmental accounting, as it seems to be tested a lot.
Yes, there's a percentage that it is going to be tested. And of course, you've probably, if you've taken our course, you know that when we talk about, the funds, we give you those little mnemonics. Don't rely only on the mnemonic. The mnemonics will help with some of the multiple choice questions, for sure. They definitely will. But remember, you want to look at which funds use modified accrual, which ones, and what is modified accrual? You book a budget. You book the activity, which all companies do, and then you book encumbrances. The two oddities are you book the budget and the encumbrances. The activity, all companies book revenue and expenses. But you're doing 3 things when you're doing fund accounting. So at the end of the year, normal companies just have to close out their income statement, right? They close it out to retained earnings. Well, you've got to reverse the budget, you've got to reverse the activity, close it out, and then reverse out the encumbrances. You've heard many people say, I jokingly call it ba-ba. And by the way, one of the more amusing things on Facebook that I find, people will text me and say, I just passed the exam, my final part is over, thank you so much. And then they say, so Tim, I guess this is ba-ba. So I always joke and say, not ba-ba, because continuing professional education is something we're going to help you with for the rest of your professional career. So yes, governmental, we have the lectures there. We work through them with you. Don't really, use the mnemonics, the grass, pie, ad, and all that other stuff. Use those to understand which categories you're in. Make sure then you understand modified accrual, ba-ba accounting. And we spend a lot of time telling you, is it assets, liabilities equals fund balance? Does it equal net assets, etc.? If you have most of that down, you're probably going to be able to master the fund accounting. All right, next question.
Any similarities between US GAAP and IFRS?
Yes. Many years ago, a good friend of mine, his name is Bob Herz, H-E-R-Z. He's part of our GAAP gang. It's a video we do every quarter talking about accounting. Bob, who had been on the international board, then became head of the FASB, the Financial Accounting Standards Board here in the U.S. And they ultimately, with the international board, signed something called the Norwalk Agreement. Norwalk being Norwalk, Connecticut. That's where the FASB is located. That agreement said that the two boards were going to try to work on converging their standards so that we agree with standards. So that therefore, if U.S. does and international does, they're virtually, not exactly, but virtually the same. And the answer is, for the most part, there are so many similarities. The new revenue recognition standard is a great example where we're virtually clones. Consolidations, virtually clones in that area. One area where we didn't quite get that far was the area of leases. In leases, we in the United States have 2 capital leases now. We have the finance capital lease and we have the operating capital lease. We did this because of real estate and wanting to stream on a straight line basis expenses. Internationally, with Hans Hugerverst being the chairman of the international board, he didn't like that approach. So you only have the finance capital lease. So everything is a finance capital lease internationally. We have 2 different versions of the capital lease, the finance and the operating. Ultimately, we agree. Everything goes on the balance sheet. No question about it. It's just a matter of how do you expense it on the income statement later on. And of course, the more important area, at least on the CPA exam, is understanding the US standard. But we're all pretty much on wavelength. We have balance sheet items, income items, cash flow items. We have other comprehensive income items. We're virtually the same on so many of them. In fact, in our book, we usually break out the one or two little differences that may show up as a multiple choice question. Next question.
Thank you, Tim. We'll just go with the last question. That is how to keep ourselves updated with amendment changes in audit and reg.
Okay, great question. First of all, when a brand new standard is promulgated, whether it's in tax or it's in audit, ultimately they will wait 6 months before they test it. So therefore, if a brand new law is set up today, you're not going to see it tested until July 1 of next year. Even if it became effective immediately, they'll usually all say, first of all, they haven't written any questions about it, and they've got to pre-test them. And also they want to give people an opportunity to learn that material. But one of the things you can do if you want to keep up, let's say that you're studying now for financial, then hypothetically you're going to study for regulation, but you're not going to study for auditing until July, and yet you got the materials now, and you're wondering, are these still the most current? You can go to our website. We have updates that we publish, and we say this update will give you a brand new updated page to a particular textbook, and we'll tell you, use this one if your test is after July 1 of next year or after April 1 of next year. So you can always go to our website. We update everything so that it's the most up-to-date information of what you need to know for this exam, or if you're preparing for an exam in a different window.
Thank you, Tim.
By the way, I'm just going to mention this, that you're learning in Grant Thornton are partnering here, part of Becker Partner Network. We don't take any chances, and neither should you. You want to pass. You'll notice right here, look at what we told you. Remember, 300 to 500 hours is what the AI CPA has regularly said you have to have. And I just want to point out, look at how many hours of live online training with licensed CPAs with over 10 years of teaching experience. We're bringing you more than halfway to the total highest number, and we're bringing you about 75% of the way to the best number for your success. So we're helping you earn 250 points towards the 4 parts of the exam. We're getting you close. You've got to do the rest. It's not all us. There's a little bit of sweat equity that has to be done. And of course, you've got 360 degrees of support in eligibility, evaluation, preparation, and obviously any questions you have, your instructors are some of the best in the world. We only bring instructors aboard who have knowledge of the exam, have understanding of how to teach it. You've all had bad teachers. In your college or high school experience, you had the teacher who droned on, who literally just read from the book, boring, and really didn't give you an understanding of it. The teachers you have are individuals who bring it to life, and they explain it in a way you can comprehend and understand it, and hopefully retain it so you pass the next exam. So our next slide, I'm going to turn it over to your leaders and your instructors right now, unless there are any other comments or questions you'd like me to make.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you for such an informative session. And I think there's no more questions. So thank you for your time. And this was a really helpful session for all the Vgld students.
Fine. Well, thank you everyone for having me as part of your day today. I know it's almost 8 o'clock at night over there. So I certainly appreciate you hanging around. For me, it was 9 in the morning till 10 in the morning. So I'm just starting my day. You're getting to conclude yours. But thank you for having me. Hopefully, again, we'll see each other soon. And I hope to see you as a member of our profession, the CPA profession, as we go forward. So long, everyone.
Thank you, Tim.
I'm going to stop sharing, and I'll drop off. Thank you, everyone. So long once again.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Aziz.
Thanks, Shreya. Congratulations. Good luck, everyone, with their exams.